We live in a time obsessed with productivity. We measure our days by what we've achieved, our worth by what we've produced. And yet, so many wake up every morning with a hollow feeling in their chest, unable to move forward, unable to act. Motivation has become a ghost, a distant echo of something we vaguely remember. And the more we try to chase it, the more it slips through our fingers. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and mystic of the soul, would not have been surprised. To Jung, the modern crisis of motivation is not a problem of laziness or discipline. It is the symptom of a deeper disconnection, a fracture within the psyche, a soul that has been silenced. He believed that what we call lack of motivation is often the expression of the unconscious, trying to stop us from living inauthentically. We may be chasing goals, dreams, and lives that are not truly ours, and in doing so, we sever ourselves from the wellspring of inner energy that Jung called the self. The self is not the ego. It is not the part of us that wants recognition, success, or applause. The self is the totality of who we are, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the reason and the dream. And when we live only from the ego, the narrow, controlling mind that wants certainty and comfort, we lose touch with the deeper parts of ourselves. We live a divided life. Motivation fades, not because we are broken, but because we are misaligned. Jung believed that the soul speaks through symptoms: depression, apathy, anxiety. These are not merely disorders to be suppressed, but messages to be understood. They are cries from the forgotten parts of ourselves, the neglected archetypes, the abandoned child, the unexpressed artist, the unloved wanderer. The psyche withdraws its energy when we ignore what is essential. It shuts down, not out of punishment, but out of protection. In this light, your lack of motivation may be sacred. It may be the soul's resistance to a path that betrays its deepest truths. It may be a refusal to conform, to obey, to perform. Not because you are weak, but because you are being asked to descend, to go inward, to turn away from the noise of the world and listen to what you have long buried beneath the surface. Jung called this descent the night sea journey. It is a time of disorientation, confusion, even despair. But it is also a time of transformation. Just as the alchemist must endure the darkness of the nigredo before reaching the gold, so too must the individual confront the inner void before discovering renewed purpose. And this void is not empty. It is full of potential, waiting to be claimed. The culture will tell you to fix yourself, to find hacks, to be more productive. But Jung would tell you something very different. Go to the source of your suffering. Look at it. Listen to it. What is your apathy trying to say? What part of you has been ignored? The journey is not linear. It is circular, like the mandala, returning, repeating, deepening, until what once felt like stagnation becomes initiation. This is not a quick fix. This is not motivation as adrenaline. This is the kind of motivation that arises slowly, like spring after a long winter. It does not push you forward. It calls you inward. And it begins with the courage to say, I will no longer betray myself. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When we think of motivation, we often picture movement, brightness, drive. But what if the real key lies in the darkness we avoid? What if the reason you can't move forward is not because you don't know where you're going, but because you're afraid of what's behind you? Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, the hidden, repressed parts of ourselves that we push down in order to appear acceptable to society, to others, even to ourselves. These are not just our fears or traumas, but also our unlived desires, our rage, our longing, our wildness. Every time we chose safety over authenticity, approval over truth, we fed the shadow. And now it waits. When the shadow grows too large, it begins to dominate us from the unconscious. It appears in dreams, in addictions, in sudden anger or numbness. It whispers, "This is not your life." But we rarely listen. Instead, we push harder. We force motivation like fuel into a broken engine. We read more books. We make more plans. We pretend. But the deeper self will not be fooled. The soul does not respond to manipulation. Jung believed that healing and real vitality comes not from fleeing the shadow, but from integrating it. Not destroying what is dark in us, but embracing it with consciousness. Because within the shadow is also our buried energy. Our libido, in the Jungian sense, is not merely sexual. It is the psychic force that animates life, and we've locked much of it away. Ask yourself, what dreams have you silenced because they seemed unrealistic? What parts of you did you disown to belong, to be loved, to feel safe? The more we live out a false story, the more the psyche revolts. That revolt feels like apathy, like procrastination, like the inability to care. But underneath, it's a plea for reunion, for the parts of you lost in childhood, exiled in shame, dismissed as foolish. The shadow also guards the doorway to your deeper calling. That's why facing it is terrifying. Because to confront the shadow is to let go of the mask. It's to say, "I'm not who I pretend to be." And in that moment, everything begins to tremble. Relationships, careers, habits, even the self-image you thought was stable. But Jung was clear. The task of individuation, the becoming of the whole person, requires this shattering. True motivation cannot emerge from a false foundation. It must grow from the soil of truth. And truth, in the beginning, is uncomfortable. It burns, it humiliates, but it also liberates. This is why so many people are stuck. Not because they are lazy or undisciplined, but because their entire psychological house is built on the sand of the unreal, and somewhere deep inside, they know it. The unconscious withdraws its energy as a protective act, like a body going into shock to survive a wound. Until the soul is heard, it will not send reinforcements. Jung's wisdom is not easy. It demands depth. It asks for courage. But it also offers something our shallow world cannot: real contact with meaning. A motivation not based on egoic desire, but on soulful necessity. When you no longer chase a fantasy of success, but surrender to the task life has assigned to you, then energy returns, not in a flash, but in quiet strength. So instead of asking, "Why am I not motivated?" ask, "What have I not yet faced?" Let the question guide you inward, into the dreams that haunt you, into the fantasies that embarrass you, into the anger that reveals injustice. That is where your life waits, and that is where your power sleeps. To live with purpose, Carl Jung believed, is not to follow a straight line of progress, but to dance with complexity, contradiction, and mystery. The modern world tells you to pick a goal and stay focused. But the soul doesn't work like that. It meanders, it retreats, it rebels. It calls not for efficiency, but for wholeness. And wholeness includes all that is broken, all that is wounded, all that you've tried to escape. When Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming the self, he spoke of it as a kind of sacred journey, not toward perfection, but toward integration. He understood that within each of us lives a multiplicity: the child and the elder, the artist and the warrior, the lover and the hermit. And when we suppress parts of that inner chorus in favor of only what is productive or acceptable, we sever our inner harmony. We become strangers to ourselves. And strangers cannot be motivated, only confused. To reclaim motivation, then, is not to force the psyche into action, but to reunite it. To sit with the pain you've avoided. To grieve the life you never lived. To reawaken the image you held as a child before the world taught you to shrink. Motivation, in Jung's deepest sense, is the natural result of psychic alignment, of all parts of you pulling in the same direction, rather than battling beneath the surface. This kind of motivation doesn't come from pressure. It comes from meaning, not external meaning, like success or validation, but the inner sense that your life is your own, that your actions are an expression of who you truly are, not who you were told to be. Jung often said that a neurosis is the suffering of a soul that has not found its meaning. In that sense, a lack of motivation is not a failure. It's a signpost, a symptom of a deeper hunger for something real. But meaning cannot be forced. It must be discovered, often painfully, in the folds of our most honest moments. It comes in the quiet, in the solitude, in the deep inner listening that most avoid. You will not find it on social media, in a self-help book, or in another achievement. You will find it in the dark places, where your truest voice still whispers, waiting to be heard. Jung never promised ease. In fact, he warned that individuation is often accompanied by suffering, by isolation, by confrontation with what we most fear. But he also offered hope, that through this descent, we emerge more fully ourselves, not perfect, not fixed, but whole. And from that wholeness arises a different kind of fire, not frantic, not desperate, but steady and alive.